Well, welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. I'm always excited to bring to you industry leaders in different areas of the aviation and aviation insurance industries. And today, that's certainly no exception. I've got a gentleman who I've known for going on a couple decades, a professional, well-respected claims administrator in our business. He's done all things claims for many years now. And so I'm just really excited to welcome Peter Guy, the Executive Vice President and Head of Aviation Claims at Applied Underwriters Aviation. So, Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tim. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So, yeah, just tell us a little bit about that big picture journey, the Reader's Digest version of how you kind of got into the industry and to where you're at today and the role you're in.
I will do that. I started thinking about this. And so I started my journey in insurance in 1994 with State Farm doing homeowners claims in Elmhurst, Illinois. And but prior to that, in the early 80s, or rather late 80s, I got my private pilot certificate. And I really wanted to be a pilot when I grew up. I'm still not really grown up, but I still wanted to be a pilot. And I got into a lot of, debt, credit card debt at the time, which was a lot back then. It was like $3,500. So I had to stop. I had to stop my private. And I had a couple odd jobs that ended up at State Farm. And I thought, I really want to be in a place where I can help people at the time of a need. And that's certainly when a claim occurs. So I started off doing homeowners claims with them. Couple years later, I'm at church with Brant Madsen, who's an aviation defense lawyer in Chicago. And Brant comes up to me and says, hey, I heard about a job opening at a company called AIG Aviation. Would you be interested in an aviation claims adjuster job? I said, yes, I would. And it was really the perfect marriage because I had 2 years at State Farm, did the training, and had my private pilot certificate. So I got hired at AIG in Chicago in 1996. So I think that's where we first started working together. I was in that branch. So fast forward from 96 to 08, I was there the entire time, did all kinds of claims around the Midwest. I moved over to Allianz for a few years. My journey then took me to Starr for 5 years. And then about 5 years ago, I started as a head of claims at another company. And then I joined the Applied Underwriters Group in October of 2021, having done lots of things to get here. And then we have a really nice team of people here at Applied Underwriters.
Yeah, and obviously, I think everyone in the industry thought they made a good hire. You're very well respected, and we're always excited to see a well-respected, great claims adjusters, because ultimately that's the product that we're delivering is claims payment, right? I mean, people buy insurance, they're customers, it's about how much it costs, but ultimately the product is claims service. And so when you have, really good claims people, it really makes a difference in the insurance companies you're working with. And so that's why most of the people that are in claims that make it on this podcast are fit that bill. And so it's certainly, Peter, you're definitely on that list. So one of the questions I always love to ask industry leaders is, what are you most excited about in the aviation insurance market today?
I think it's something I've been excited about since I started, and that's the people that we attract in this industry. People are generally and usually passionate about aviation, and then they dip their toe in the insurance side of the world, and they say, this is also really something to be interested and excited about, and such opportunities to provide service to our great customers and brokers. So I think that's really what continues to excite me is the level of talent that we can attract in the aviation world, and specialty world, compared to maybe some of the other markets out there. And the other thing too that I think is fantastic is technology. Just to get a little old school, when I started, there was no fax, there was no email, there was no iPhones. So the ability now to get out in the field and capture and document things is pretty amazing. And the world moves pretty quickly these days, and so that helps.
Yeah, and just building on that technology piece, we're in this new era of a new frontier, even in the aviation space. We're looking at the increased use and proliferation of the drone market. We're they've been talking about using it in delivery for years, and it's already been increasing in use, and we're on the dawn of the new era of the advanced air mobility movement, the eVTOL aircraft.
Yes.
Just curious how, um, you know, you guys are preparing. Every market's different and has different risk appetites, but from a claims perspective, this is more battery, pilotless. How are you guys kind of looking at that and preparing for what's coming in the future for the aerospace and aviation industry?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I would say right now there's not a lot of appetite from the underwriters on the drone market here at Applied. But when we look into the future at some of these eVTOL companies, I think the underwriter's approach will be very similar to any other product or any other company that's operating out there. Is it safe? Does it have a good track record? Is it stable? Does it have a proper management team? I mean, I can tell you from my own personal perspective, I hope that I get an opportunity to get in one of those one day, say here at PDK. And
Mhm.
I just drive to PDK and it takes me to Hartsfield. I get to skip all that traffic. It's a little bit like the Jetsons, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's sort of a new frontier, and it's actually pretty exciting to stop and think about. So I think the underwriter's approach would be very measured, as with other products in the industry.
Yeah, I would think that as a claims expert, you're going to have to become well versed in battery technology and life cycles and things like that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely, there is going to be a learning curve for anybody that gets into that business and involved in that, and then of course will come the costs to repair it, both the labor and the parts, the materials, and the availability of those, and the downtime for the operators. And honestly, we're seeing that all over the industry right now. Just as a broad statement, everything's getting more expensive. Parts more expensive, availability of repair technicians to fix those aircraft. None of that is getting less expensive or taking less time. So I would anticipate something similar for that for the eVTOL in the future.
Yeah, and that really leads into my next question, which may be part of what you just mentioned, but what are your biggest concerns in the aviation insurance industry today?
That is one of those concerns from the costs continuing to increase and the availability of parts. I think one of my other concerns too, from a broad perspective of having a team here, is we have seasoned adjusters on the team here, so people have experience. But I think for some who are hiring folks, which is needed in the industry, who need to be trained, um, trying to do that remotely will be very, very challenging. And I think ultimately, perhaps unsatisfying for people who are hired to do it and people who are entrusted to train others. So being able to work remotely can be a big blessing for a lot of people, but it brings different kinds of challenges, and not just from the training, but from integrating team members, getting to know one another more than just virtually. So the virtual world moves fast, like I said, but from a human perspective, building those relationships, that does concern me a little bit looking forward.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a big issue that I think most everyone's concerned about, and the fact that right now, from a rate perspective, there's a strong capacity, meaning plenty of carriers willing to offer coverage and limits and values. And
Yeah.
so that's holding the rates down artificially while the costs of, repairs, the downtime, continues to rise. And obviously, all that goes along with that. So at the end of the day, underwriters have to set rates that will pay for the claims and generate a profit at some level, and then we're dealing with, I think, the big buzz term we talk about a lot is social inflation. So
Yes.
the inflated jury awards and things like that.
Yes.
And then I know there's other factors that we can't really talk about in depth, but the Russia confiscation,
Yep.
the issues there. So you know from a claims perspective, do you see the things you just talked about? Do you see that leveling off? We've got new tariffs and things like that that
Yeah.
may affect the parts. What are some of the other, concerns from your seat in paying claims? You kind of anticipate from some of those issues.
agree on the potential for large jury verdicts. Um, and that reverberates not only through the lead carrier, if there's co-insurance, the co-insurers are looking at that and attempting to establish reserves on cases that may not match jury verdicts. Um, that reverberates through the reinsurance market throughout the rest of the world. And I can assure you that the reinsurers are very aware of these large verdicts, and that has an impact on businesses who are operating with reinsurance and the cost to acquire it. So that continues to be a concern for all of the underwriters in the US and any markets in Europe supporting US business. Um, it's such a great unknown. And there are cases out there that end up with juries, which is appropriate, absolutely appropriate. If a case goes to a jury, then, but the unpredictability of it is what I think ultimately does put a lot of focus on the US market versus other places in the world.
Yeah, and we're recording this late in the spring of 2025, and so in this part of the life cycle, what are you seeing with we've had ongoing increased cost of parts, availability of parts,
Yeah,
obviously all the things that come with it. How has that needle moved just in the last 30, 60 days? Is it a steady issue, or is it increased, or just kind of sticking the same?
honestly, it's really about the same with the parts and also the availability for shops who have sufficient number of qualified A&Ps to get in there and repair these aircraft and get them back in service. So I think that's going to continue to be a challenge. And you mentioned the tariffs. That's also an increased cost to the overall repair of the aircraft, and or if there's a rental engine or parts and it's coming from somewhere else in the world and a tariff applies, all those costs uh, are getting passed on. So that's going to continue to be with us for some time, I think.
Yeah, I would think so as well. And we've seen an increase. We've had more claims definitely in the U.S. We've seen a few extra commercial airline losses this year, but just from a general perspective, it seems like the statistics in general aviation, at least from the NTSB, is that the claims, the amount, the number of claims have not diminished either. Is that what you
Oh,
guys are seeing?
yes, the attritional losses are still significant in our industry, along with what we call the long tail business.
Hmm.
So, long tail claims. So there are claims in the marketplace right now from 2018 that are folks are attempting to resolve. They're still not resolved. And when they've been around that long, it's generally litigation. And when you have litigation involved, there's a lot of litigation expense. In fact, I don't know what the figure is for those Russian leased engines and aircraft, but that's a massive number back into the industry to pay the attorneys to litigate everything. So the longer the claims go on, the more the costs are for everybody. And that also presents another challenge.
Yeah, I mean, you know, from the top down, reinsurers are looking at it, and then
Yes.
obviously that affects how the direct or the underwriting, community of the direct insurers go,
Yep.
or the cedent, and because it's a mixture of paying for claims today and anticipating what funds and the adequate reserves for tomorrow, and aerospace insurance in general is, as less than 1% of the entire market, and so
That's
we
right.
have a low number of insurable units. We have the high potential for catastrophic loss, and so it
Yes.
really, makes aviation or aerospace insurance a much more. It's a bigger challenge, and it takes people doing, uh, you know, more actuarial activity with fewer bytes of information to do it. So I can imagine, from a claims perspective, that's just equally as a challenge, wouldn't it be?
Absolutely true. I mean, you really stated that quite succinctly. the lack of data, the lack of large numbers, and the actuaries and the claims people still have jobs to do to set appropriate IVNR if you're an actuary, or to set an appropriate reserve, looking forward with sometimes less than optimal information. And as I say, reserving is not a science. It's somewhat of an art. You have to take what you have along with your experience and judgment and look down the road and make a realistic assessment of what you think the probable outcome will be, both on the indemnity and the expense side. And I think I'd like to touch on something a little bit about that, if it's okay. It's about the importance of communication on the claim side, because we talked about service, how important that is for what we do. We serve our brokers and clients and underwriters, but same thing on the communication. When these large losses come in, if there's co-insurance and or reinsurance involved, we want to make sure we're communicating with our insureds, with our brokers, all those folks downstream internally, and do our very best to make sure there aren't any surprises. Nobody likes surprises. So do really make sure that when we get folks on our team that they understand the importance of communication downstream, because relationships really do matter. And sometimes people can make errors of omission, forgetting to make an important communication to you or to the client at an appropriate time. So that goes along with the experience, making sure you have experienced people on the team. So anyway, I just want to throw that about communication.
No, I think that's huge. And, part of the audience for this podcast, they're in the aviation insurance industry, and part of it is aviation professionals, risk managers.
Yep.
And so, I'm honestly not sure everyone, even inside the industry, really understands that process on a large claim. I mean, a claim, when you have, insurance companies are required by law, if they're licensed to do business, to maintain certain reserves they can't just spend everything. They have to have for every premium dollar written, they have to have a certain amount of reserves in the pool, so to speak. And so when you guys get a claim, that's why you get in the process, you set a reserve because you're reserving a part of that pool. Is that kind of how that works, or could you explain that better?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when a claim comes in, and this is a little bit different at every single company, but you have some procedures, and I want to call them almost some philosophy, a guiding philosophy for how a claim should be reserved. And so that will be, in our case, a probable outcome, right? So it's a probable. It's something we think may occur in the future. So it's a good faith effort based on experience and the facts known at the time to set the reserves. We try to do our best to set the reserves and keep them there, but they do move because claims are fluid, and to say otherwise isn't realistic. So we set our reserves, but the actuaries set what's called IVNR, incurred but not reserved. So the actuaries are also looking at the book, and they do what they do. They can see what we posted, but they need to post their own IVNR within the organization. We don't really have any insight into that. That's totally up to them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, because I think people, they just don't fully understand that reserve has an impact on the business, and that it does move. It's the best guess for today, and then as more
That's right.
happens and more is discovered, it moves, and
Yep.
that's why it exists. So I appreciate that perspective. So,
Sure.
moving on, what else? We've talked about a lot into technology. We're in a new information age. What else do you think can be done to improve aviation safety and mitigate aviation insurance type of claims going forward?
Yeah, when it comes to the safety, I was thinking about that. Really, for let's say it's an individual operation or a corporate operator here for industrial aid or a helicopter, or it might even be your own Anza. It's just making sure that if you're in a school on an annual basis, go to school, be proficient, fly a lot, really understand the aircraft, the environment that you're flying it in. It really comes down to so much personal responsibility. Because let's face it, everybody gets in an airplane and they take off, and the expectation is they're going to land safely on the other side. But things happen in between that you and I are both aware of. looking at claims over the years. If you're an operator at an airport, just make sure you have a good, solid risk management, safety loss control programs that are out and about on the premises, looking for hazards, making corrective efforts for those hazards, because airports and, GL claims, they're very, very dynamic. From inside the terminal and airside, there is a lot going on. So a lot of it's just keeping your eye on the ball, understanding your operation, and knowing what you need to do to be safe.
Yeah, that's good sound advice, and we're in an interesting time where there's a lot of potential technology that
Yeah.
is planning to come and make things safer, but is in your position, you have to anticipate what's coming, but you're really looking at what's happening today, and
Yep.
so there's an exciting future ahead, but we don't know what it is because right now it's it's moving from concept to proving, but
Right.
it's not into it's not all into production, and so there's a lot of exciting things coming that, if we have this conversation in 5 years,
Yeah.
there may be more to it. But definitely, it's always the fundamentals, having the safety mindset, the safety culture, those things that a safety management system has,
Yes.
training, and, just having an attitude of safety. Obviously, that's always going to be important to a good operation. And certainly in aviation, as you know, that's as important as anywhere else. So, just looking at our time, is there any questions I should have asked you, but I didn't, or do you just have any closing thoughts you'd like to share about this topic of aviation claims?
No, nothing other than, thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk about aviation claims. It's been a passion of mine for many years, and I'm grateful to be able to share with you what we're doing here in Applied. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, claims guys are always fun to talk to. We can't share a lot of the claim stories that you guys get to experience here because of the private nature of it. We respect the insured's privacy, but, it's always great to go to any show. We were just at the Aviation Insurance Association annual conference or MBAA and sit down with the claims guys and say, what's something interesting you guys have heard lately, because they have the best stories and they always have something that'll really impress you. So if you run into Peter out at one of the conferences, you have to get one of those stories from him that he can share off the record or in private, but we can't do it here today. But yeah, Peter, thank you so much. Always appreciate talking to you and working with you and the work that you're doing, and appreciate you giving your time today to share some of those insights with our audience. So thanks once again for being here.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's all for this episode. Join us again next time as we continue navigating the waypoints in aviation insurance. Until then, enjoy clear skies and unlimited visibility.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share it with someone who would benefit from this information. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player so you don't miss any new episodes, and to help our show have more impact. This episode is brought to you by Aris Insurance Solutions, your flight plan for navigating the turbulence of aviation insurance. For more information, visit arisinsurance.com. That is www.aerisinsurance.com. Disclaimer: these episodes are for educational purposes only, and due to the changing regulatory and legal nature of the business, some information may change over time. Having a well-educated and experienced aviation insurance broker on your team is an absolute requirement to success in business and for managing your aircraft and aviation business risks.